Hey, how's it going everyone? It's Gavin from Balls to You, and I just want to touch on a few topics that I've been seeing around social media and a few videos on YouTube. It's nothing too crazy. It's not even really a rant. It's more of I get asked things and then I think, right, let's do a video. So, or I see things. So let's go on the first topic I want to talk about, which is feeding in a feeding tub. No. Plain and simple, no. What people get told is if you find that your animal is too food aggressive in its enclosure, take it out and put it in a feeding tub and then put it back. Couple of problems with this. The first problem is this. You need to look at the species you have in the enclosure that you have. Ball pythons are nocturnal, so during the day pretty much you go in, there's not a problem. You go in at night, it's a whole nother kettle of fish. They are food orientated. So how do I get around that? So in a night, if I want to work with the animals or do some cleaning, what I use is the trusty old hook. Bit of a tap technique. And all you do, touch them with this, snap them out, this feeding response, snap them out, just make them aware, it's not feeding time, something else is going to happen that's positive, and they are fine. No problems. If we're talking about other species like lubrids or chondros or any other boa species, again, a lot of people with bigger snakes will use the old tap hook or hook technique, and it works fantastic. Second problem, if you're only opening that enclosure and they presume it's going to be feeding time, then that says to me you must be only opening your enclosure when it comes down to feeding time. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but to me, if you're going to do something like this, don't use a feeding tub. All I would advise is more interaction with that animal. So every time you open that glass or the enclosure, as in glass front on a vivarium, or you open the enclosure, use your hook, hook him out, or tap train him, make him aware that it's not feeding time and get the animal out. Okay, works easy. Okay, simple. Feeding tubs, no. There was a video I posted on Instagram. For those who follow me on Instagram, you'll probably have saw the video of a person feeding a ball python in a shoebox with a live prey. I don't agree with live feeding on being filmed, but it's nature. But it's something you won't see me posting or filming is live feeding. I don't really agree with it. The guy put the snake in, obviously the rodent was in there, and the guy basically went to move something that was by the side of the box. The snake saw the heat from his hand and he smelt the rodent, and guess what? Bang, got him. It's crazy. To me, never do that. Okay, never feed in a feeding tub. The only time, if any time, to feed in a feeding tub, if it was for a medical purpose, or if you was assist feeding or force feeding the animal and you need to watch and make sure that it digests its food, then I would agree, maybe yes, sticking in a separate tub in front of you while you make sure it swallows its food safely, fine. But a perfect animal that's eating fine, no problems, don't feed in a feeding tub. The other issue is you've also then got to pick that animal out and put it back into its enclosure. Now, a lot of people say you shouldn't handle a reptile, and particularly we're talking snakes, 48 hours after they've eaten. Well, I don't believe that's true. I'm sure you'll all agree, you've all had to handle an animal with a full belly. It's just you're gentle with that animal, lifting it up and putting it and moving it around, this, that and the other. So yes, you've also got to handle that animal and you don't want it to regurgitate its food, but I still don't agree with feeding in a feeding tub. Okay, once you've fed the animal, you don't really want to touch it. What you want to do is just basically leave it alone to let it digest its food. Okay, and again guys, there is no stipulation on 48 hours, it's just a guideline. Okay, if you've got to go in there and touch it after 12 hours or pick it up after 16 or 24, then you've got to do it. Okay, it's just a guideline. The second topic I want to bring up is ball python setups. ball python setups. Not clubrids, not chondros, not boas, ball pythons. You could adapt this for other species, but I'm just going to talk about what I know 100%. I still see people using, and I get emails from people saying they use glass tanks. No. Glass tanks are predominantly for fish, and when I say fish, I know it's not just fish. There's other aquatic animals which can use tanks, but let's just talk hypothetically. Okay, let's round it off to fish. Okay, glass tanks are for fish. If you want to put your animal in a nice enclosure, then there are some brilliant vivariums out there. Okay, vivariums are the key. Glass tanks, they don't hold heat, they hold too much moisture, i.e. humidity, which we'll talk about in a minute with the next subject, which is to do with airflow. So airflow is a key ingredient, I feel, and I did a video on airflow. I'll try and put a link in the description box, or put a little icon here for you to go and watch it. It was mainly to do with racks and why I feel airflow is so important. So we'll touch on that a little bit regarding, because we're talking about setups. So do not use glass tanks for ball pythons, okay? They are very nervous animals. They don't like to be seen. If they think you can see them, they will be very nervous, and even won't feed, will become very sort of shy, all that sort of stuff, which can lead to fear, aggression. So even sometimes the clear tubs that you see behind me can create problems. So glass tanks will definitely not help it. Okay, the reason why the glass tanks were used back in the day was because it was all that we had to hand. It was pretty much all that we knew. Put it in a glass tank. But again, this is where people had problems with breeding, with feeding, because the snake or the animal wasn't happy. No glass tanks. Okay, vivariums, yes. Glass tanks, no. Okay, the best setup for a ball python would be a tub setup, plain and simple. Okay, a tub setup works fantastic. You can make them look pretty, you can decorate them. I've even seen people decorate the outside, of like a, let's say you've got a black or a smoked tub. I've seen people decorate the outside with some drawings. So you know, if it's for the kids, you know, they've drawn pictures of snakes and decorate. You can make them look pretty, but overall, it's the health of the snake that we're concerned about. Okay, so glass tanks, no. Tubs, vivariums, yes. The next and final topic I want to talk about is bedding. I'm still seeing people having issues with bedding, and there's a few issues. The one is mites, plain and simple mites. I've got a good friend, he decided to use a bedding from a pet shop, and unfortunately it brought mites into his collection. He's on top of it now, he's pretty much nailed it, but he was very open with me, he was really kicking himself, and I felt for the guy. The guy is a real nice gentleman, and I really felt sorry for him. He did mention I could use what's happened to him in one of the videos. I'm not going to mention no names, that's entirely up to him, but the guy's a real good guy, and as soon as he found out, straight away he swapped it all back. How can you prevent mites? It is a hard one, guys, I'm not going to lie. First of all, you've got to make sure anything snake related you're bringing into your collection, you need to quarantine. Second of all is whenever you go to a reptile show or a reptile shop, be sure before you go into your snake room or your reptile room to change your clothes, wash your hands, and just give yourself a good dust off. If you've got long hair like me, again, just brush your hair through just in case. It's better to do the preventions than it is to deal with the aftermath. Okay, so it may take you a little bit of time to change your clothes and what have you, but trust me, guys, it will be worth it. The other thing is people into your collections. Now, again, this is one of the things that us as breeders we have to deal with. People want to come, they want to look at your snakes, and they want to hold your snakes, and they want to see what you've got, and that's fine by me. The only issue I have is cross-contamination. Again, mites. That's not saying that that person has got mites in their collection. They might have, I don't know. But you've also got to consider the health of your animals, and that is what comes first. They could have gone to a shop, they could have looked at a few reptiles, or popped to a shop to pick up some frozen food on the way to yours or whatever, and they've actually got a mite on them or 2 mites on them, and before you know it, you've got an outburst in your collection. So I don't really let people into the collection. That's not me being funny, that's just me being protective of my animals and the hard work that I put into making this happen. So please don't take it personal if you think that you're going to come to my collection and have a look and I turn around and I say no, it's nothing personal. It is literally because of prevention is the key. Okay guys, so you can do that. The other thing is, if you are going to buy bedding or use bedding, there's a little thing that can be done, which I've brought up before. You can actually put the bedding in a cold place for around 2 weeks. Again, I'm no scientist, this is just stuff that I know people, friends of mine, other breeders, that they do this and they've never had an issue. They will put their substrate that they've brought in their garage for 2 weeks before they use it and then bring it into their collection. Does it work? Well, so far my friend hasn't had or didn't have any problems with mites, but he's now on plain paper. That's not because he had problems with mites, that was because he wanted a bit more, he wanted to see what was going on, which I'll cover in a minute. So bedding, if you're going to buy bedding or use bedding, put it in a cold place. They recommend 2 weeks. Again, it's a guideline, you can do longer if you want, and then introduce it into your collection. Me personally, I wouldn't do anything. I don't use it. I've used it before, I've had problems, never again. Simple. I used a substrate called Lignocell, and I had 2 issues. One was I had the first issue I had was when I noticed I was feeding the animals. I only had a few at this point. When they drop the rodent, then they pick it up and they eat it and have bits of Lignocell, or what looks like aspirin basically, sticking out the mouth. I was horrified. So I would sit there and get all this food. Obviously, again, it's not healthy for the snake, it's just eaten. You know, I'm messing with the snake. They never regurgitated, okay? But I didn't want to mess with them, but I was that stressed and worried, it just drove me nuts. So they would drop the rodent, pick it up, and then they had bits of bark and all sorts sticking out the mouth. Never again. Okay, so they drop it on plain paper or kitchen roll, it's not going to affect them. Okay, it's not going to get stuck in the mouth or anything like that. The other issue, which was the nail in the coffin, was I went to a pet shop, picked up some Lignocell, and 1/2 of the tubs ended up contracting mites. And the only thing I did pretty much that week was I did a full deep clean. And so I know it was nothing I brought in. I hear you say, well, you could have brought it in from the pet shop. I didn't do that because they weren't the first animals I went to, and not only that, if I did, then it would have been all over the place, all over the collection. But it was only in 2 particular animals' tubs. Well, I found one mite in the one tub next to it, but it was certainly in the one tub, in one of the tubs. So for me, I'm 110% that was brought in via the substrate. I've never had a problem with mites since, touch wood. And I choose not to use any sort of substrate anymore. As you guys know, I use plain paper and kitchen roll. There are good and bad things for that, but I just want to touch on one more bedding that I don't use, and the reason why I don't use it. I see a lot of people, and I hear a lot of people raving about cocoa mulch or cocoa fibrous bedding. I'll try not to mention any branding, but I see people ranting and raving about it. Fibrous bedding or cocoa bedding, or cocoa mulch or husk, whatever it is. The problems with it. Okay, it's fantastic for holding humidity, Now the problem you've got with that, if your tubs or enclosures don't have a good airflow, which airflow is important, airflow will get rid of stagnant air which is built up inside the tub. Okay, so you've got air coming in, air going out, good air coming in, bad air going out. If you haven't got a substantial amount of airflow in your tubs, fibrous bedding like this cocoa stuff will create high humidity and condensation, stagnant air, and condensation is a fantastic thing because a lot of people look at it as a bad thing. If I've got condensation on one of my tubs, I know that there's a problem in there. I know that there's some sort of, either the snake's tipped over its water bowl because the humidity will be way too much. I've got high humidity in some of my tubs at the minute because some of the females are shedding, but there's no condensation at all on the sides. Okay, condensation build-up, like I said, is a good thing because you can see what's going on. So a lot of people you'll see a lot of videos on YouTube where you've got some breeders with high humidity and you'll even see it dripping down the side of the enclosure. It's not a good thing. It can cause problems like RI is the main one. It can also cause scale rot if they've hurt themselves, or if they've caught their scale and it's sitting in wet water or it's in dampness. It will create that scale to rot. The other thing I find with fibrous bedding is when the snake poos and wees in the corner, the wee goes straight to the bottom and it stays on the bottom. Okay, you may spot clean and take out that bit of poo and urates from the corner, but the wee's still in there. Okay, you have not got rid of the wee, it's embedded now into the substrate. And guess what happens? The heat from the heat mat will obviously warm it up. There's no airflow, condensation, and you now get stagnant air, which is now potentially toxic to your animal. I don't like it. My views, I don't like it. I don't believe a animal such as a ball python needs anything high humidity than, say, around about 70. Sometimes it'll creep up, sometimes it'll drop down. 70, 65% humidity is fine for a ball python. They can survive in higher humidity, but again, I wouldn't advise going too high for too long. So that is the reason why I don't use fibrous bedding. I use unprinted paper and I use kitchen towel. The reasons why I use unprinted paper is because when you are breeding, you get to see what's going on. So you get to see the scent trails from the female. If they wee and poo in the corner or what have you, then pretty much on newspaper or unprinted paper, it dries very fast. You can just scoop it all up, screw it up and put it in the bin. New, if you're spot cleaning this is, okay, screw it up, put it in the bin. Fresh piece of paper, fresh water, clean the bowl out, whatever you want to do, away you go. It's literally seconds. It doesn't make a mess. I haven't got bits of substrate all over the floor. It does not create a mess. If you want a deep clean, it's the same principle, but then obviously you disinfect the tub, scrub it out, wipe it and clean it down, and then put your paper in. Again, it doesn't take that long. I find with fibrous bedding or Lignocell or Aspin, Aspin is very cheap, it's very dry and molds very fast, but a lot of breeders use Aspin because of the cheap aspect. And if you're keeping a lot of snakes and breeding, then it's all about overheads and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, plain paper. The downside to using plain paper, actually let's stick to the good side. The good side is if you see a mite, then you're going to see it. If your snake has got a mite, you're going to see it on the paper, okay, especially if you're using unprinted paper or kitchen roll, plain kitchen roll. I don't really advise using newspaper because the print can, again, if the animal wheezes, the print will link, or the ink of the print will leak into the tub, and if you've got a tub which is quite worn, it will embed itself into the tub's plastic. And also I've seen some snakes come out, white snakes pretty much, come out with imprint of, you know, news of the world on the side. So don't use newspaper is my advice. Aspin. Aspin for me is too dry. It is very cheap and a lot of breeders use it. I don't use it, or I've never used it, again for the same aspect of it's very similar to Lignocell, where the animal is eating and all bits of stuff are sticking out of its mouth, panic stations, but it does mould very fast. So if you see a bit of poo in the corner, it will mould rapid. So for me, it's not normally a viable option. So just want to get a few things out there. So just a quick recap: don't feed in feeding tubs. It really isn't working. There are ways and means to get around it, and again, it's more, yeah, just don't do it. Okay. Ball python setups, don't use glass tanks. Okay, they're not very good for airflow and all that sort of stuff. Don't use them. And last and finally, bedding. If anyone advises me what bedding to use, I always advise plain paper or kitchen roll, for the simple fact that I've seen and heard too many bad things regarding other types of bedding. Every bedding has its downfall. The downfall for the paper is, if it does get too dry, the worst that's going to happen, you're going to get a snake with a stuck shed. And I'd rather spend 20 minutes getting a stuck shed off than I would hours upon days upon weeks upon months trying to sort out an RI infection or even mite infestation. Trying to sort out a RI rather than I'd rather spend 20 minutes as upon days. I'd rather spend 20 minutes as upon hours, days, turning into weeks, turning into months, trying to sort out an RI infection or even an infestation of mites. Okay, so it's up to you what you do with this information, guys. I hope it helps. It's just a few things I wanted to touch on. Don't get me wrong, guys, if you're doing what works for you, then fine, keep doing it. But anyone new coming into the hobby, let's please try and educate them a little bit better, and let's try and understand why we do what we do, why we use this type of substrate, why we don't use a glass tank, you know, why we don't use feeding tubs. The information's all there. Some of it is, or a lot of it, guys, let's say, is wrong, but let's try and all educate everyone that's coming into this hobby with the correct information. Let's look at the species that they're at, you know, they want to get, and let's give them the correct information. So look for a specialist in that particular species that you're looking at getting, and get some real information, some good information off them. Okay, everyone, hope you're all okay. Take care, and I'll speak to you guys soon.